My name is Laveena Archers. Welcome to Awakening Your Nine-Centered Awareness. When it comes to the awareness that is true and inherently, authentically intrinsic to you, the dynamic to which you have never before seen, if you have not yet experienced being your own authority, I know that this is a very personal journey to which none of us can expect. You'll see, indeed, your potential truth inside of you, that actually once you are on the other side of this, you'll see that there is nothing to regret. No matter what pain and suffering, what challenges and heartache, whatever it is that you have seen or wherever it is that you have been, when it comes to being you and authentic to you, the source inside of you is true. And how we access that according to the nature of human design is to align to our form differentiation, your divinity in your different, authentic nature of being, yourself. And so as we move through today's presentation, I want you to remember that we are nine-centered Homo sapiens in transitus, and that this time, this place, this space for you to contemplate what it means to be a dualistic or binary consciousness is going to be the thing that lights your way and helps you make it through, as long as you're aligning to what's in accordance for you to base your decision-making process on and find that trustworthy sign, whatever it is. Peace, satisfaction, success, surprise. These are the things that are going to help you light up inside in alignment with your purpose, your highest sense of potential, your highest sense of material or spiritual calling. Truly, they are one and the same, because that which is outside of you, that is part of the nature of you, already rests inside, the core aspect inside of you that pulls you, this beautiful magnetic monopole that we all have, even if you don't have consistent access to the direction, the felt sense of the higher self pulling you forward, drawing me to me and you to you. We all have this intrinsic value. And the element of the nature of what it is to be a nine-centered human being is frequency. You'll get sensitive to the resonant frequency, the emanation, the vibration that you put out and that others are putting out. And when you're connected up, you'll see it. Just don't believe me, try it and see. The experiment with your strategy and authority is going to be one of the most beautiful adventures you can embark on. It is not easy, but when it comes to worthwhile, absolutely. Now, as we go through today's presentation, we are going to be talking about our journey of self-discovery as a species, talking about humanity's evolutionary process from the seven-centered to the nine-centered human being, which we are, this Homo sapien in transitus, because until 2027, the Ides of February, actually, my birthday happens to be, that we are going to be shifting into the 2027 realm, this new golden era, this era of enlightened selfishness, as Rob would prophesize, and the era of the sleeping phoenix on the rise, abundance in great disguise. You're going to find that this nine-centered being, vehicle form that you are in, is currently going through a dramatic shift. Have you seen that? Have you felt it? Can you notice it all around? There's a lot of fear and chaos that rules the day because people don't like to change, and none of us change in the same way at all. What you'll find when we take a look and compare and contrast the basic Homo sapiens, the seven-centered construct that came before us, to this nine-centered Homo sapiens in transitus that we are, and then talking about the full-blown nine-centered being, you'll get a better, bigger picture, a broader view, and a greater attunement to the nature of you to which all of us resonate as far as what we are collectively as a global human cell. Each of us is a cell within the greater human organism. So let's go ahead and dive into our presentation for today. Again, my name is Laveena Archers. Welcome to the Human Design System, founded and First Messenger by Ra Uru Hu. This is the science of differentiation. This is about testing and validating your own form principle so that you can trust what is right for you and intrinsic and valuable to you, rather than questioning nor ever doubting your authentic nature having value. What you can find when you align is you come to this space and place within you that rises to the occasion if it's right for you, that allows oneself to retreat without guilt or self-recrimination, that intrinsically holds true to the value of each sovereign state of individual being, their own authority, that you can allow people to agree to disagree, that you can allow people to simply be, rather than trying to be something that you're not. You can come to that space and place where you align yourself to the correct timing, the correct people, the correct, we call it fractal family. If you're on the fractal, welcome. So glad that you're here. All right, so we're going to begin with a quote from Ra, as I love to do. You see, quote, he says, "We are here to be deeply aware. We are here to be more aware than any demonstration that ever took place during the seven-centered realm. We're not here to surrender our identity. We are not." Thanks to Ra Uru Hu, founder of the Human Design System. This right here is the Flammarion engraving that Ra used when it came to his logo for Jovian Archive for a very long time. And now what we'll look at here and see, poking your head through the sky, the firmament of the stellar background frequency that it seems to be that is separate from us, and yet in truth, all of that energy flows through us all the time. And indeed, it is part of the imprint of the nature of our being. So oftentimes when you come to this place of resonance with your, or harmony with your vibratory nature of being, it can feel like you're poking your head through the sky. It can feel like you're aligning to truth. And in that sovereign nature of being you for you, no apologies, no sorries required. You can just be all that you are, and I mean all that you are, with all the self-perceived, formerly flaws, through any trial and tribulation, no matter how hard you might be banging against those things that do not work. When it comes to the alignment to purpose, there is something deeper, some undercurrent of awareness, that passenger or witness consciousness. If you've had a chance to see that, then you know what it is to feel that harmonic nature of being, that everything is okay, no matter what the rule of the day, that one can stand straight rather than bow down and cow to the powers that be. This is the time for all of us to rise fundamentally, to intrinsically have and hold to our nature of being. And you do that through your strategy, experimenting with being your own authority. From the perspective of Ra, everyone had an intrinsic right to be their own authority. Now, is it true that everyone is? Maybe not always. Once you've experimented for 7 full years, your first full cycle of deconditioning, Ra's promise to you is that you will see without question your motivational frequency, your authentic nature of being. Now, does that mean everything's going to be flowers and roses afterwards? No, sorry, not true. I heard him say once that the 8-year mark was oftentimes much more difficult. And guess what? We're not born with something that we could not handle. We were born with a genetic nature and born with the potential to go through cycles of experience, move through the inexperience, and come out the other side to make progress, only to start again, maybe at a different level, a newer evolutionary spiral. So when things are even more difficult, when you have that source inside that you can tap into, tune into, when you can align and see the grand Maya, the grand play of life, as something that you don't have to be scared of and you don't have to worry or doubt, no matter what the alarm bells are ringing in your head and your voice says that you must be alert to. There is a way for life to support you, and that is when you surrender to life itself. When life starts to move through you, when life takes action through you, it can feel like something's being done to you, as in you're witnessing now what it's like to be in form, differentiation, and alignment. And that is a very different state of being than what most people live in their day-to-day mundane reality. And again, we are consciousness in form, a binary consciousness in this form. Ra says, shattering of the original crystals of consciousness and the beginning of their evolutionary process, endowing form with consciousness. I spoke briefly about the nature of personality crystals, how not only are they the medium of our own unique personality experience, but that they also endow other forms of life and inanimate life with personality. When I say inanimate, I'm not referring to your average rock, but specifically stars. Stars are, in fact, make up most of the inanimate objects with genuine personality. The only other objects with a personality crystal are the filtering objects of our solar system, planets, moons, asteroids, minor planets. That is derived from a medium of a unique crystal. So important to remember that the neutrino ocean is a living thing, pulsating in the vast production nurtured by all stars, and that the neutrino ocean is not simply hardware functioning as a communication grid, but software created via the unique quality of each star, and in our case, filtered by the myriad objects of our solar system. All of these objects have a place in our mythology as agents and imprinters, and once found and named, have completed their evolution. I love the mechanics of the gods in quote, global orchestration directory, the gods, if you will. Finally removing the mystery, laying bare their mechanical truth and influence, only to rediscover the mystery. If you worship Varuna, look no further than the precise location in the sky and enjoy contact in the stream. So when it comes to aligning to this mystical path of union, not only marrying the incarnative stellar frequency field that you were imprinted with, but also the flavoring of each of the planets that create the unique mixture that you are here to attune to and live through and find yourself in alignment to. These fundamental imprints, the stellar background frequency, not just our star, but everything, filtering through our solar cell and coming into rest in this space of being. And then imprinting everything, formulating our creative reality in the fecundity of mind, my mind is saying. The attempt to understand or comprehend can sometimes drive you quite crazy because you want to understand, you want to know this and that, and what does this mean, and what does that mean? And in truth, remember, when you are trying to analyze just one aspect of you, that is not truth. Truth, again, individual and comprised of a whole stellar sea, this background frequency that imprints each of us in order for us to find our form differentiation through this time and in this way. And in this imprint, we find our truth. So the nine-centered being, when we talk about nine-centeredness, it is a mutation, an evolution. And it is occurring from 1781 to 2027, as far as this nine-centered vehicle, Homo sapiens intransitus, we who are that, do not have access to the full-blown mechanism of the emotional system, parted or separated from its ego manifestation of attuning to things that are outside of one's control and trying to control them. The solar plexus, the emotional intelligence, is here to have an intrinsic spirit consciousness, oneness consciousness, unity consciousness, and yet in this particular form and vehicle, we can only poke our head through the sky. We do not have access to the full-blown rave mutation that is to come in 2027 and beyond. Not that everyone going to be born is going to be rave, only that we don't have the fully mutated nine-centered vehicle. So the last of the humans, according to what we think of as human, actually died out in around 1881 because for 90,000 years, we who are human developed through a seven-centered vehicle. And so we're going to compare a little bit as well and talk about this evolutionary process and journey of mutation. In our evolution from the seven-centered to the nine-centered being, since 1781, humanity has been expanding because in order to have mutation, we need to have a vast differentiation and a lot of, let's say, human, my mind is saying data, substance into which that we are all being subject to this genetic imprinting of bonding and mating with what is different. And that bonding and mating with what is different is actually subsiding. And in future, it will be type with type, angle with angle, according to Ra. So transitioning from the Saturnian cycle, the seven-centered human being, of 28.6 years to a Uranian cycle of 84 years as far as the lifespan. We are Uranian creatures, we who are nine-centered Homo sapiens and transitus, according to Ra. That means our life is unusual. Our lifespan, according to the man, is that we will be living, we are designed to anyway, living healthfully to 84 years and potentially beyond. But do we see that? Unfortunately, isn't it true? I don't know about you where you live, but when I look around at the older people in my society, I don't see the health and vitality, particularly at the cognitive basis, that one would expect when it comes to living a full lifespan, a full life cycle, unfortunately. What I know from experimenting with my design, just so, is that my mind and also my brain mutated, shifted over time. I'm entering into my third 7-year cycle of deconditioning, learning, studying, growing, adventuring, sharing, communing, commiserating about what it is to be in this form. And there is no possible way I could have spoken to you back in the day in this way with the kind of experiences that this body had been subject to because of the mental machinations or the distortions of the values of what I thought was true. So I am simply one example. I am not more special than any other. Awareness, awakening, it is our birthright to be our own authority, but it's not necessarily a place that everybody is going to get to, but anybody can. And you can because you're here now, because the time is now, because it's never too late and it's time to differentiate. Okay. So life expectancy, 1781 was actually the midpoint of our transition when the nine-centered transitional forms began appearing, along with a new type of human being. We call them projectors. So the newest kind of type, auric frequency field type, is a projector designed to focus, penetrate, and absorb one person at a time. That's what it's designed to do. So the life expectancy back in the day, average 36, because why? Burned hot and bright, that being who was aligned to the dark light of Saturn, the Saturnian creature, the seven-centered, made as slaves, born to work, many of them much so, And we are going to go through the design evolution of each of the types. I imagine you'd like that, just to know what's true in this transiting form. So 7-centered Homo sapiens, remember, 85 to 90,000 years ago is when they first appeared on the stage, mutating out of the 5-centered creature. And it is a 7-centered habit to make up stories about why other people do what they do. So, as an example, I bet they did this because that. Or, I assume that you meant this when you said that. Oftentimes people, this is a real sign or hallmark of a shadow state tendency, as an example. If somebody is hearing something that triggers their relational wounding, some kind of, maybe it's a partnership trauma or lover drama, whatever it happens to be, what they might say, rather than taking the other at face value, is, oh, so you're saying this, so you mean that. And you can feel, when I play the stressfulness of being not self, you can feel the forcefulness, the pushiness, the angst, the suffering, because really, wounded people, people who are hurt people hurt people. And it is a 7-centered habit from the development of the Ajna, our 7-centered kind of enlightenment that they were all aiming for. It was a habit from back in the day, we still have that hangover, to try to control the world through the thought patterns, your mind, in these games of dominance and submission, right and wrong, good and bad, blame and shame and guilt and fault and regret. Can you imagine a world where you do not have to feel like something is wrong with you because you intrinsically know your own value? That no longer can somebody say something and it trigger that relational wound, where you can allow people to be what they are and agree to disagree. That you can allow yourself to see rather than immediately reacting to the negativity. It is a truth that people hurt people, and that people tend to recreate relationships with their partners in order to try and heal the wound. And so if you believe the mind story inside of your head about yourself, what tends to happen is that you're just going to rebirth more of the same wounding, the same trauma, the same relational drama. And so when it comes to being a 9-centered Homo sapiens, intransitus, it is a very different story. The 7-centered had an authority that was outside of you, other people telling you what to do. These are our rulers, our kings, our pashas, our emperors, our empresses, God, the church, the state, whatever the case may be, the country. The focus was on mind and the development of your connection with the eternal nature of you outside of this, I don't even want to go there, but what they thought of the body, its base form, trying to exalt the nature of spirit only and not align to the form, deep disregard for the form as anything special, anything precious, anything valued or valuable. Evolution at that stage required homogenization. And so this is where all of the energy went up to the Ajna in order to develop self-reflective consciousness, in order to develop awareness that operates over all time. Because isn't it so that you can go up into your mind and you can go into the past and you can start to cry, and you can go into the future and you may start to wonder, or you might be here and now and may or may not be able to explain the mysteries in life. But this awareness principle for the 7-centered human being was a very different show. And we are 9-centered, don't you know? It's time for mutation. And mutation takes time. It does. The mutation of the larynx happened about 90,000 years ago. And the mutation of the solar plexus as far as its developmental potential of spirit consciousness, oneness consciousness, true, authentic unity consciousness, a transauric awareness of no separation, that starts in 2027. In 2027, when the background frequency shifts and Pluto enters into gate 41, line 5, a whole new era shall ensue. And that era is going to be about the awakened Phoenix. And this is a very different story. For more on that, Ra's Rave Cosmology 2027 semester will help you see part of the nature of what's to come. Now let's talk about the evolution of types. Intrinsically, originally, we're all open, wide open. Open as in not vulnerable, but open as in not defined, and very much connected up to the nature of being a part of Mama Earth, Gaia, humanity being one with nature. And so this is the 5-centered. I've put a dream rave design here so that you can see what it looks like when it comes to the sleeping nature of you. When we go to sleep, a majority of our gates turn off, and the 88 degrees of the lunar movement before your birth shows your natal dream rave imprinting. This is the deepest area of conditioning that you can have when you're sleeping. And it's one of the main reasons why we advise that you experiment with sleeping alone to see what a difference it makes to your form differentiation, your awareness principle of who you are in this life without the, so my mind is saying contamination. Sometimes that can be seen as a little bit negative, but it's true frequency-wise. As an example, my husband, when he's sleeping, he has a generator aura. I cannot sleep next to that man very well at all. My whole experience with him. And finally, when Finding Human Design went, oh, well, of course, no wonder I can't sleep next to him. Always knew that I had a hard time sleeping next to people, but particularly, generative at night. For the, my design is reflective at night. Most people are. So just to go back to this journey, think about before this 90,000 years ago when we mutated from 5-centered into 7-centered. That was the original human. So all reflective in nature. The original human creature is reflector. If we had names for type back in the day. Okay, so let's call them reflective instead. Then out of the reflector creature in our mutative evolutionary journey, we see the manifesting generator as the next place to look. The manifesting generator, pure manifesting generator, empowered in the now to be who they are for themselves. Charismatic, busy, the capability of being able to have a lot of energy manifested in response. This is the pure manifesting generator channel. And then out of the manifesting generator came the pure sacral generator and the pure manifester. You can see pure sacral generator and pure manifester. Those were the types that came out of the manifesting generator. Finally, in 1781, the projector comes online, born in a time that was designed to support their need for education, to support their ability to master systems in order to be advisors who can guide. This is the evolutionary journey that we have gone through over time as a collective species. Now, 90,000 years ago, when we talk about the mutation of the larynx occurring, humans developed the ability to enunciate and articulate, and ultimately, this is how they controlled their environment. So as an example, if we think about a 5-centered being back in the day, gathering, and now we evolve and it's time for the hunt. If you are hunting in a pack and you can make a sound to communicate to the others around you, you are more likely to dominate the form, the material plane. You're more likely to succeed and survive with communication. And so when this larynx mutation happened, what happened was it gave us language, it gave us sound, it gave us the ability to develop formulas to communicate with each other. And this is part of the journey of developing ajna, or self-reflected consciousness, in order to make sense of what happened in the past, in order to predict what might happen in the future, and in order to explain what's happening now. That is the way that the mind works. It operates over all time, which is why if you make a mental decision, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. Mental decision as in mind saying, I think, therefore I do, or this or that or the other thing is true, without weighing your authoritative principle, whatever it happens to be. All of you have a personal process of authority, but it is never the mind inside the head talking about self, because it is too polluted, Ra's words, but definitely contaminated. When it comes to the openness in your design, everything that is open, anything that is white, it's reflected inside your mind. And you can pay attention to that voice, and you can hear the transits talking through you. You can hear other people affecting you if you were but to study and appreciate the values of each of these open gates or channels and the lines, and get familiar with this cosmic sea, this soup that we all swim in, this neutrino ocean. Get familiar with it and familiar with you. However, you don't have to go that deep. Laveena likes to go deep, my Pluto, when it comes to finding the solutions that are inherent within the logical framework of the human design system. What you can do is simplify, dumb it down. Frustration, anger, bitterness, disappointment, signposts. Signposts for you to be aware of, signposts to stop. Just like the arm of, I don't even know what they're called when you're going to cross the train tracks. If that arm comes down to prevent you from crossing the train tracks, you stop, don't you? You don't want to keep going. I'm just going to barrel through this frustration or anger or bitterness or disappointment. I'm just going to vent my bitterness and spew it out on everybody. I hate this place. Are you going to get what you really want? Alignment, attunement. If you're constantly complaining, shaming, guilting, faulting, regretting, which is a seven-centered hangover, 1781, that's old stuff. And yet still, to this day, people still complain and shame and guilt and fault and regret because they're not living in alignment. Now, the Homo sapiens used their fear to drive their intelligence to control the world. They took charge in order to take control. They used their minds, their articulation. They used dominance and submission. They used fear tactics, scare tactics in order to get people to obey. This is the old way. And we are no longer that. And it's time to let go of those crutches of fear running the show. Soften your heart. Open it up. Let go of any pain or distortion that you think is your fault, their fault. There is no fault. The seven-centered era, the development of the ajna. And this was to create Maya. Maya simply means to measure. The mind, it just measures. The Maya, it is illusion. Based on your state of confusion or doubt or questioning as to why, the fundamental why in the sky, why me? Your mind makes up stories. So all of the energy, when it came to the seven-centered, moved up in a unidirectional path to the ajna. And in this nine-centered era, that is not true. It is not true that the energy within us goes from the kundalini, the root chakra, all the way up through the power column and out through the head. Because we have a mutating solar plexus. In this nine-centered era, we are moving away from the strategies of the mind. We are moving away from the dominance, fear-based tactics, control mechanisms, and into spirit consciousness, unity consciousness, oneness consciousness that is a developing process for all of us on this human plane. So the energy now moves in a bidirectional way between the ajna and the solar plexus. That's the way that it moves, bidirectionally, in order to help facilitate the mutation that is happening. This solar plexus that is part of the nature of being a 9-centered human is not fully to the developmental potential able to get to spirit consciousness. It is not full-blown spirit consciousness that is not dominated by the motor function of the currently mutating solar plexus. It can't, according to Ra, just passing on the message. But also, too, we can get a little tiny poke through the sky. We can have a glimpse of the nature of being. We can feel the remnants of the old self, and we can, as we step forward into the future, over this boundary, this passageway, the darkening of the light. Things are very dark before they're bright. There's always going to be a cyclical process when it comes to attuning to you, or patterns, or pulses. We are all a conglomeration or a configuration, a combination of each of these ways. The timeless being that was here before time was time. You, I'm talking to your soul imprint, the witness consciousness, the personality consciousness. You and I were no different according to the nature of the crystallized, crystal of consciousness. We have no difference with the dog, the cat, the whale, any mammal, really, birds, reptiles, fish, insects. It's the same personality crystal of consciousness that is riding around in this physical vehicle, witnessing life, having this grand dance of Maya to be entertained by. So it's not about transcending Maya. It's not about controlling Maya. It's about surrendering to the form principle, this vehicle that aligns to its truth, and coming to respect the nature of you just as much as you respect the nature of others. So as we move through in this awareness of you, remember, from 7 to 9 centered, we went from this 7-centered being into this 9-centered. Again, Homo sapien intransitus. Now, in that 7-centered era, there was this development of the ajna to create the Maya. And again, all that energy moved up in a unidirectional path to ajna. So as we transition to the 9-centered human, you and me, we're Homo sapiens intransitus, we move away from mental strategies into our form intelligence and energy. Again, bidirectionally between the ajna and solar plexus. What this means then is that there is this cognitive awareness of the social and emotional relational intelligence that is moving back and forth as a process of our development of spirit consciousness, as a process of our conscious personality witness to this body, this form, this vehicle that over time, as you align, begins to dominate, as in begins to be more heavily weighted and more paid attention to. The more you pay attention to it as a witness consciousness, the more you honor it, the more you respect it, the more you value the form. You don't negate the form. You don't hate on the form. You don't shame the form or blame the form. When you can accept it truly, unconditionally, there is no need for forgiveness because it be what it be. And rather than you trying to control the reality of what the form is experiencing, you can surrender to the sweetness or satisfaction or peace or surprise of what it is that lies inside when you align. Again, when we were 7-centered, all the energy went to fuel ajna awareness. Ajna awareness, the mind's consciousness that operates over all time, is fundamentally strategic, okay? The ajna has this periodic way of being, okay? So flowing from the root up to the ajna, the purpose was to create this vast Maya that you see here now, to build the ajna awareness, which expanded the Maya, and expanding the Maya required a self-contained aura. It required a sense of separation. This is me and that is you, and there's no way we can value the same being one thing. And yet, what's to come, what our future holds, is to be one, to give over the sense of self to the one thing, the thing that we are a part of. So the way that we were operated when we were seven-centered is significantly different than we are even today, not just the future mutated way. The addition of two chakras, two centers in our human design language by splitting of two would be too simplistic of a way to describe the new Homo sapien in transitus. So how did this 7 become the 9? Well, there is theorizing that the splenic system and the solar plexus split, that the heart and the G center split. But in truth, everything had an upgrade. It's not that we have the same root that we did back in the seven-centered heyday, nor the same sacral, nor the same ajna or throat, or in their terms, crown chakra, in our terms, head center. So in the seven-centered, the great sentiment back in the day of the seven-centered human being was love thy neighbor as thyself. And this was the great mechanism for the enslavement of Homo sapiens to a homogenized form. In that, if you were to love, honor, and obey everyone in the same way, and put God outside of yourself to obey, then it lacks the ability to be one's own authority. So it's not about that anymore. What's really in store for this Homo sapiens is a vast mutation. And so let's explore what's more when it comes to how the seven-centered Homo sapiens operated, again, through fear. The seven-centered gave us our seven-centered religions, the societal structures, the indoctrinations, the philosophies, the societies that are all meant to control large groups of people. And how do you control large groups of people? You indoctrinate them, you educate them, you enslave them and make them super slaves. But how do you do that? You don't control the people, is what they found. This is the great lesson that the seven-centered being learned. You can't control people. You can control their minds. And to this day, we are still being controlled and enslaved because of homogenized society. The governmental standards, all of the rules, all of the laws, all of the movies, television shows, commercials, politics, everything that we see that they feed to us tells us how to be. Good people do this, bad people do that. Yeah, good, bad, right, wrong, up, down, black, white. This is the hallmark of a shadow state mind that tends to think in always and never polarized thinking, rather than seeing that the truth is paradox, that paradox is the glue of the universe, that we can get through this deep conditioning is part of the nature of Ra's promise to you by experimenting with your strategy and authority and letting go of that seven-centered hangover of the Homo sapiens. That started 90,000 years ago and in 1781 shifted. So their control was the first attempt at self-reflected consciousness. It made it easy for mind to take over if one would believe the thoughts that you think in order to control and manipulate the outside realm. I think, therefore I am. I believe, therefore it is. Yeah. Or I know, and of course it's so. The seven-centered life offered its reward in the afterlife. And ultimately, the mind running the show is the very nature of what we want to crack when it comes to the facade of your not self-purpose, your shadow state reality that was built slowly, layer by layer, layer by dirty layer, where you were told that you were bad, fundamentally flawed, or not right for being the true nature of you. And the true nature of you, whatever is defined inside of you, the very specific, highly specialized form differentiation nature of you, and reflectors, please remember, you have your lunar authority process that gives you your lunar authority. So it's not true that everyone is here to be the same. We are all different. And we no longer is it that we can find our reward in the afterlife. It is here now in this embodiment, in this vehicle, living its one precious life. It is about learning to be embodied as a passenger consciousness, witness to this form, rather than your mind attempting to run the show. And this is what we learn in human design, why it's so. Because this is the trap. It is always a trap to try and control, to try and measure and compare this problem and that solution over this one and that one, where people try to ask, well, what about this and what about that, trying to measure and compare my design with their design. There is no measurement. You have no comparison. We, in the past, were addicted to our mind's solution, drawing a line down the page, weighing the pros and the cons. All education thus far, overall, has been strategic in nature and not honoring the kind of receptivity, even our quad right receptive beings. When we talk about quad right, I'm talking about variability. Variable, the arrows on either side of the body graph, variable shows our cognitive potential and the 16 orientations to awakening as nine-centered human beings. So even the very most evolved of us, the right, quad right, not that they're better than the quad left, even those don't know what it's like to be in a true nine-centered vehicle, because they are still locked into and limited by this particular human design, intransitus, which is fundamentally strategic in nature. All of our schools, governments, everything is strategic. Everything indoctrinates you. Everything tells you this plus this equals that. That's the answer. And this is how you have to get there, rather than allowing you to be receptive to how your mind might like to work on that problem and face whatever challenges. So people tend to should all over you. Have you seen? Would you agree? You should do this, you should do that. Your own mind does that, doesn't it? I should do this, I should do that. Your mind is screaming inside of you, I should be better at this. I should be more graceful, beautiful, wonderful, intelligent, sexy, brilliant, capable, whatever the case may be. Wherever you find this flaw or lack inside, where you think that thought that makes you shrink inside, those things you can let go of. And yet, how do we? When we think, therefore we think we are, therefore we think we are, when in fact, what we think is not even half of the story, according to Ra. What is true to this form principle dominating is that it's the hardware to the mind's software. And so the software, quite light, think of floppy disks or a CD, DVD, comparatively to this giant hard drive on your desk, or mine happens to be on the floor because it's too big to fit on the desk. When it comes to the nature of what you are inside, you are so magnificently different. And let's talk about how different you are in this transition of type and transition to the new style of leadership, comparing the 7-centered and 9-centered. Of course, there is no comparison. Now, this right here is one of the videos that I recommend you watch at some point when it comes to Ra's material on Jovian Archive, source of the human design system. Absolutely check into and see some of the Penta and Wa mechanics. They'll be referenced in your course materials. So the 9-centered human being, 9-centered creature that we are, we have now currently, because of the back and forth energetic movement, 2 competing awarenesses operating. And which one's going to dominate? Well, the one that is energized, of course. And yet, because they are going back and forth, energized meaning the solar plexus, because it's currently dominated by its motor function, because the awareness is going back and forth and the solar plexus is not stable yet, this nine-centered being is in a transitional phase. And because we, who are nine-centered Homo sapien and transitus, are subject to this mutation, it is not stable. It is not capable of being able to be fully aware without the desire, passion, or need that streams and screams for its need for touch, or its longing or yearning for the passionate abundance of spirit that it knows intrinsically lies within, and yet is uncertain that it can find. This being that desires and burns for new experiences and progress and change, all of that. We are dominated by the motor function. And I mean we, not just those who are defined. I'm defined. How about you? If you're open, then it's true that you're amplifying the motor of those around you. You are subject to, even if that person's sitting there, maybe they're pretending to meditate. But inside, I'm thinking of a yoga class, inside they're seething because of this or that or the other thing. I can't believe he slept with her, or whatever the case may be. The trauma of the mind, rather than subjecting oneself to the enlightened state of being, which is the awareness principle of unity. And yet, we are seemingly finite human creatures. Most people would agree. And yet when we come together, there is no separation between you and me. We are one thing. We are a relational creature. And that relational creature has communion. And the true, authentic communion of nine-centered awakening is the most sweet thing you could ever feel. Better than any sex you might experience. Better than any food you might imbibe, ingest. Better than any hug you might receive is communion, true, authentic, or marriage bond. Communion, true communion, has to do with fractal alignment. Nothing more, nothing less. If you're on the fractal with people, when you are aligned to the right people, place, and time, you will know it intrinsically and invaluably so that you are designed to connect. That you are designed to connect, that it's right for you to. Because why? Success, satisfaction, peace, and surprise, the signposts of the spirit of abundance that arises from within, your form principle, your essence of the nature of spirit being you. For you, if you're generative. For others, if you're projected. Your impact, if you're manifested. When it comes to our beautiful reflector friends, the surprise in life, in order to evaluate and be the barometer of the health, safety, security, well-being of the community. Surprise. Maybe delight, awe, and wonder, but it doesn't have to get so fancy. It can be what it is, and you can just be like, wow, I didn't know that was there. Now let's talk about the transition of type and leadership. Back in the seven-centered heyday, manifestors dominated. This particular channel is the only channel of tribe that is actually at its core Wa mechanics, or the organizing channels of a group of 16 people. Wa mechanics run the show the moment you have 10 to 16 people and further. And this channel right here has no equal. That's why we say king or CEO in modern day parlance, the 45. That's why we say biting through this 21, this hunter-huntress that is designed to be in control and give over its power to be released, or money, or whatever, to the 45, who is the spokesperson for the entire tribes. That being as collective, maybe a world of tribes. So we speak to the nature of manifestors now in seven-centered construct. Please do not get confused with current nine-centered manifestation. Still, to this day, the manifestors are looked to as, God, I wish I could manifest. Design envy is one of those real things that the not self is plagued by in the beginning. Oh, I wish I was that. And a lot of people, most of them, wish that they were a manifester, unless you know a manifester for real, and you see how difficult it can be to be manifested. The aura is closed and repelling, and these were our leaders as seven-centered human beings. They were guided by the transit field and motivated the other types to action. How? Dominance, fear, telling what to do. And that's no longer true, that it works in the same way as it did back in its heyday. Manifestors encouraged homogenization and sameness. How they did that was through education. What that does is it makes people more controllable. It makes people more submissive. When they're in fear mode, they don't have time to ponder the mysteries. They are much less self-empowered when they're in fear, because they're subject to whatever the current narrative is that the manifestor is expressing out into the world. Now, again, projectors, as far as their place in the world, they came in at the perfect time. They came in at the time as a type, a new type, never before seen, after 1781. And this projector, with its focused, penetrating, and absorbing aura on one person at a time, designed to advise and guide. They are not here to lead necessarily, not necessarily, because non-energy type. Within the context of human design, you might see that there are conflicting keynotes depending on what level or layer of design differentiation that you are looking at. As an example, Laveena has the motivation of desire and the trajectory of leader, but it doesn't mean that I can tell somebody what to do in order to lead them. Even if I had the full channel of the alpha, it still doesn't mean that I can take somebody by the hand and force them or make them go somewhere that is not right for them. In fact, it feels quite painful. When people ask me to be their authority, I feel an immediacy of the ab reaction inside, like a wall of no that arises that tells me, no, it isn't so, for me to take on that person's authority and tell them what to do. Back in the day when I was way conditioned and completely not self, I glorified in being able to tell people what to do, the power, the thrill of being able to dominate, because it is in my design to learn about what it takes to be the one in charge. And yet it can break your heart if you take on somebody else's power without it being correct for you or control. It is not correct for me to control anything other than that what comes to me as a recognition, mutual, as a formal invitation when it comes to the big things in life. Because projectors help other people know themselves one person at a time by guiding others to use their energy in the correct way, to be aware or to see something that they may not be aware of or be able to see quite yet themselves, and is part of our value. It's part of the intrinsic nature of what it is to be a projector. Seeing, seeing, seeing. Seeing is the whole movie. It doesn't mean that you have to say anything, in fact. You can just be there, you can just see. And as you penetrate into the other with your awareness, you can find that as you align, the right conditioning with the right other leads to the success of the relational dynamic. No success, there is only bitterness. No invitation, no mutual exchange of value, and that means energy. For a non-energy type as a projector, it means in this day and age, opportunities or money, some kind of value exchange that recognizes the value of the projector for the advice, for the guidance it gives. And in this current day and age, currently, this type transition, the projector tries to give its gold or cast thy pearls before swine. I was going to say swan. That's quite nice. It's not to be derogatory to the swine. It's that when people aren't ready, it's a waste of time and energy. So there's never any forcing nor any pushing that a projector can do for very long before it burns itself out, before it lives in a land of bitterness that turns into incredible resentment, particularly with any of the gate activations, channels, definitions that are linked to energy. So one person at a time, that is where our true power lies. We are not left-oriented beings in this nine-centered Homo sapien intransitus. We are not strategic. This nine-centered is the only form-based system, this human design system. It teaches the deep respect for your form, your body, and that you are your own authority. That this form is here to bring you experiences in this life. And again, the rewards are not about the afterlife. So when I say left-oriented beings, we are now looking at the variable orientation, which comes from tones and speaks to the nature of each of our cognition. So there's going to be 4 arrows on either side of your body graph. The personality in black is going to say P, and then it's going to be either L or R, left or right. Same thing on the other side, except it will say in red, it'll say D, as far as the D being design, standing for design, and it's going to be right or left. So if we were to split this apart, cognitive difference of what it is to be 7-centered versus 9-centered currently, this left is strategic, and it's more leaning towards the ancient way of doing business. So strategies, trying to control realities. Example, my mind is left. So it thinks, because it identifies with what it thinks about, and it resonates to color right above the tonal cognition. My colors are both exactly the same underneath my lines. So that cognitive potential of leftness can get me all caught up in identifying with the mind and thinking that I have a choice when it comes to making a decision as far as whether this or that, as if I have a choice when it comes to engaging with this person versus that person. And when you believe the mind's story and the body wants to do something different, you can make yourself go crazy, quite literally. When you believe the lie, the ego I inside, as who you are and what you have to do. And this is the path of suffering, identified with the not self rather than what is true. This 9-centered Homo sapien intransitus, this binary principle of personality and design, of the mind and the vehicle, leaning towards right, and yet still, even with the quad right, we still do have left tendency. For example, just look at our structure of how people are trained in any industry. Yeah, prove your theories. Yeah, test, memorize, strategize, rather than allowing people to be what they are. Time for some recognition. Fear. When it comes to the fear of this overwhelmment that most people live under, the containment of our freedom, we have been overwhelmed by that left-dominated programming and conditioning that is a remnant from being Homo sapiens 7-centered for so long, that it is a potential, not necessarily, but strong potential that many people are living with the remnants of that ancestral trauma within the physical cells of the being, that you are motivated by fear, that you are afraid for your existence, maybe potentially fearing the extermination of your lineage or even the species. So strategy and authority is our compass, your authority being your process to be able to find your way out of the fear. And this is why it's so important to experiment with being your own authority, not taking anything at face value. We had a mutation in the way that our ajnas operate, and now we take in everything from the environment. We don't focus on any specific trajectory and exclude everything else. There is a myriad of a diversity when it comes to your interpretation of what it is to be. So there's a lot when it comes to the mind that is different from the seven-centered control mechanisms. We still, to this day, think that we have to control the world. However, we are not here to be a slave to the mind. We can do this experiment and see how mind can be put in its proper place. And we do that through experimenting with our own mechanics, with the mechanics of the structure of our human design, so that we can align. Because what mechanics do is it bypasses your mind. We're not a singularity of focus anymore. Remember, we're a binary consciousness. So when you use and implement strategy, being your own authority for making correct decisions, what you'll find over time is that as you align decisions, life is made through you. Mind stops being your authority, it making you feel bad because you should, shouldn't, X, Y, and Z, whatever the case may be. Your mind not being your authority frees your mind, liberates the passenger in order to see. Instead of the vulnerability of suffering and pain and distortion of one's reality, I wish it could be this way, I want it to be that way, oh, why wouldn't it be the way that I intended it to be? You know, instead of all of that pain and suffering, distortion of reality. Can you get the life that you were intended to have? Yes, you can, by being a nine-centered being, as in being one's own authority rather than subjugating yourself to somebody else's dominance over you. You don't have to submit to those things, those people, those places, those beings any longer. And the true self, the authentic nature of you, is designed to be aware. That's what human design is here to facilitate in you. It's about awareness. So the greatest agent for change, what is it? Awareness. And there's this flywheel of acceptance and awareness, acceptance and awareness. Awareness is knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. Synonyms, consciousness, recognition, realization. Ross said that this was the science of differentiation, and it was here to facilitate self-realization. Self-realization for us who are nine-centered. Not to say that there's not other wonderful tools, tips, tricks, or techniques to get to that place of awareness, but that human design is unique in that it reads your genetic code, it gives you your signposts, it gives you your strategies, it helps you implement this mechanical experiment in order to liberate your mind so that you can see, rather than believing in your vulnerability, or maybe invulnerability, depending on whether you think you're an egomaniac or not. Okay, so awareness. When we have mechanics without awareness, it is so dangerous. Ross said something to the effect of nothing more dangerous than mechanics without awareness. Not self-mind is your thoughts you think that are disempowering, that align you to laying blame or shame or guilt or fault or even regret. Because when something new is put in front of us, our habit is to use the mind to deal with it. And our mind is a collection or configuration of adaptive conditioned strategies that your mind believes to be true because in the past they may have worked somewhat for you. But this is a habit from seven-centered life. If you wall off your heart because you've been hurt in the past, and you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable and open to maybe being hurt yet again, those walls go up, those shields go up more and more, even deeper than before. And it allows you to be locked and limited into this very small space rather than the expansiveness of the heart, rather than the vulnerability of being capable to not just love and be loved, but the nine-centered creature is here to be love in the world, the embodiment of being love in the world. Can you be the unconditional acceptance and love of your being in the world? Maybe not consistently, but when you find that you overcome that vulnerability that leads you to hide and lock away your heart away from any potential pain in future, that the challenge and the upset increases when you are not living in accordance with your authority, being your sovereign nature of alignment and attunement. Now, Ra said that we are a very, very complex binary, that binary creature. Remember how I said personality and design, this complex binary? They are mind and form, basically. Psychology on the black side and physiology on the red side. And what allows them to come together in communion with the right vibratory frequency, with the right connective field, is being you, for you, and because of you, being connection to others. We are not alone. We're not separate. We are still connected to others. And in this new era, we have this strength of interdependency arising when it comes to our interactive field. Rather than dominance and submission, the nine-centered human being is here to have interdependency as its nature. Not codependency, but interdependency. And the way in which these two aspects of you connect up to be what is true for you, authentic and real, is the home of the magnetic monopole, gate 2. Whether you have a planetary activation or not, all of us have a monopole, a singularly pulling pole, monopole, a magnet that is holding, again, me to me, you to you, and your mind and your body to this form principle, this vehicle together for this life. When it's time to pass on, the monopole and the crystal of consciousness that is in the ajna, the design crystal, they reunite and they leave the body together. And that personality crystal stays for about 72 hours for its bardo experience. For more on death, dying, and bardo, you can see Rave Cosmology, Death, Dying, and Bardo by Ruhu. So I'm going to go over a slight variation in a slide that I found in Genoa Bliven's materials. He's a 3-5 manifester at Human Design America. He says, I have some changes in there, so I won't say that he's quoting, I'm not quoting him here, just little slight modifications. It says, you know you're waking up from the thrall of conditioning when you can see how your thoughts are programmed, how they try to manipulate you or others. You are deconditioning when you don't act upon or believe the mind's storyline, which always leads to suffering. Quote, only the not self suffers, unquote, Ruhu. A nine-centered awakened being is going to be able to look and see and accept things as they are. Takes its time according to its design to honor its own process and speaks its truth without needing justification, rationalization. A nine-centered human being does not try to interpret the motives or the reality of another. It can ask and it can allow unique perspectives because everyone is here to see things slightly differently. In some cases, we can have people who are seeing things very differently. Now, it also, as a nine-centered awakened human being, you will never again second guess or question the value of yourself or degrade your inherent sovereign right to be who you are. You will never have yourself degrade your own value in being. And I would say as well, others. Respects others' boundaries without making demands, threats, accusations, or exploitation. That's a nine-centered human being. We will ask about your experience. We will allow that experience to be what it is. And we have an open mind to see that everyone's perspectives can be vastly different. This nine-centered being is drawn to those of like vibration in order to support each other's evolution and growth. Okay. That's what it is to be a nine-centered human being. To wrap things up, let's hear again from Ra on what makes us different. He says this is what makes us different. What makes us different from all our predecessors is a recognition that there is a consciousness that operates within us that is actually there to be able to take care of most of the things that we have labored with unsuccessfully all our lives at the mental level. Okay. Your entire life before you came to human design, you tried to trust the things that are absolutely not trustworthy within you. And you potentially ignored those things that are intrinsically of value to you. And not to lay blame on anyone's feet, well-meaning parents though they are, or caregivers, or churches, or pastors, or educators, or whatever, doctors. Most of the time, what people see is what we are differently expressing in uniqueness. And from birth, oftentimes, people outside of us, they don't necessarily agree with our difference. And so then we learn to hide those things, to be ashamed to be seen. We play small rather than standing tall and staying above it all. It is my great wish for you, my desire that you attune to that which is true. Follow your strategy, honor yourself as your own authority, and live in full totality of the blessed beauty and wonderment of what it is to be embodied as a nine-centered human being. Intransitus, mind you, a nine-centered human being that nevertheless knows what is true. Namaste. I feel so happy. Thank you for being here. That was my new recording of the nine-centered awareness. Any questions on the topic? Anything that you'd like to share? I would love to hear.